The year was 1845. A mysterious blight spread across the green fields of Ireland. It attacked the potato, the main food for many Irish families. What started as a small worry quickly turned into a big problem as the potato crops died. The Great Hunger, as it was called, was more than just a famine. It was a disaster. Millions of people were about to face a terrible time. The happy sounds of children playing were replaced by the sounds of hunger. The once green fields, full of life, turned into empty, sad places. Hunger, relentless and cruel, tightened its grip on the Irish people. The potato, once a symbol of sustenance, became a harbinger of death. Families, once full of life and hope, were reduced to skeletal figures, their bodies ravaged by starvation. Children, their eyes hollowed by hunger, cried out for food their mothers could no longer provide. The elderly, their bodies weakened by years of hardship, succumbed to the famine's deadly embrace. Disease, a sinister companion to hunger, swept across the land like wildfire. Cholera, typhus and dysentery ravaged the weakened population, claiming lives with terrifying speed. Mass graves, dug hastily and without ceremony, became the final resting place for countless souls lost to the famine's relentless grip. Even as the Irish people starved, a steady stream of food left their shores. Grain, livestock and other foodstuffs produced on Irish soil were shipped to England, filling the coffers of wealthy landowners while the Irish people perished. The British government, despite being aware of the plight of the Irish people, did little to stop the flow of food out of the country. The prevailing economic ideology of the time, laissez-faire capitalism, dictated that the government should not interfere in the free market, even in the face of such suffering. The sight of ships laden with food leaving Irish ports while their own people starved was a bitter pill to swallow. It fueled resentment towards the British government, which was seen as complicit in their suffering. The export of food during the famine remains a contentious issue to this day, a stark reminder of the human cost of economic ideology. The land that had once provided sustenance for the Irish people was now being used to feed their oppressors. The British government's response to the Irish famine was a study in indifference and incompetence. While some charitable efforts were made, they were woefully inadequate to address the scale of the crisis. The workhouses, established as a last resort for the destitute, became overcrowded and disease-ridden. The conditions within these institutions were often worse than those outside, with many inmates succumbing to starvation or disease. The workhouses, intended as a safety net, became death traps for countless Irish men, women and children. The government's efforts to provide relief were often hampered by bureaucratic inefficiency and corruption. The distribution of aid was often mismanaged, with food and other supplies ending up in the hands of those who needed them least. The British government's failure to address the Irish famine remains a dark chapter in its history. The workhouses, grim institutions scattered across the Irish landscape, stood as bleak symbols of the famine's devastation. They were places of last resort, where families, stripped of their dignity and hope, sought refuge from the horrors of starvation. However, the relief offered within their walls was often an illusion, a cruel substitute for true compassion. Families were torn apart, husbands separated from wives and children from their parents. The meager rations provided within were barely enough to sustain life, and the conditions were often squalid and overcrowded. Disease, rampant within the cramped and unsanitary conditions, spread like wildfire, claiming countless lives. The workhouses, meant to be havens, became breeding grounds for death, their very walls echoing with the suffering of the innocent. Soup kitchens, established by charitable organizations and individuals, offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. Driven to desperation, many Irish families saw emigration as their only hope for survival. The coffin ships, as they became known, were overcrowded and unsanitary vessels that carried waves of Irish emigrants across the Atlantic to the shores of North America. These voyages, fraught with peril, offered a chance at a new life, but at a terrible cost. Conditions aboard these vessels were deplorable. Passengers were crammed into cramped quarters, often without adequate food, water, or sanitation. Disease ran rampant, turning the ships into floating tombs. Death, a constant companion on these journeys, claimed the lives of countless souls, their bodies committed to the unforgiving depths of the sea. For those who survived the harrowing journey, the arrival in North America was often bittersweet. The Great Hunger cast a long shadow over Ireland, its impact felt for generations to come. The population, decimated by starvation, disease and emigration, would never fully recover. The psychological scars of the famine, passed down through families, shaped the Irish identity in profound ways. The famine fueled a deep-seated resentment towards the British government, which was seen as complicit in the suffering of the Irish people. It strengthened the movement for Irish Home Rule as the demand for self-governance grew stronger. The memory of the Great Hunger serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence and the devastating consequences of poverty, inequality, and political indifference. The stories of those who lived through the famine, passed down through generations, continue to resonate today, urging us to remember the past and to strive for a more just and equitable world.